Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the 86 F's to Give podcast. I'm your host, Al, and I am so grateful that you are here with me for episode 18. And speaking of gratitude, this is the Thanksgiving episode. And I even mentioned last week that I wanted to do an episode about mindfulness and gratitude and journaling and all the things, and how perfect of a segue to do that this week during the week of Thanksgiving. This episode may come out on Thanksgiving, although I think I will probably push it to the afternoon on Friday because I just feel weird blowing up everyone on Instagram about my podcast on Thanksgiving Day. So I would probably hold it until Friday, but either way, it's still in the spirit of being thankful, and I think this is a perfect episode for this week. So I'm really excited to dive into talking about all things mindfulness. Today we are 86ing our mindlessness and tapping into our mindfulness, our present, being present, our journaling, our gratitude, all the things. And I always like to start these episodes by talking a little bit about why the topic is important to me and why I want to, I'm so passionate about talking about it. And so first, learning about and implementing mindfulness into my life has seriously changed my life. And I don't mean that in like a dramatic, it changed my life way. Like, I'm actually so serious. It has 100% contributed to the positive incline in my mental health since college. And I feel like I discovered and kind of heard more about mindfulness like right after graduating. And so, I don't think it's a coincidence. I know I've done a lot of work, but I think it's a big part of where I'm at with my mental health journey today, I think has a lot to do with using these techniques, and I'm really excited about sharing those with you all today. I also am obviously just really passionate about sharing the little tips and tricks that I learn and techniques that I've picked up over the years with others. So like, what better thing to talk about on a podcast with people that's about like self-help? So that's obviously another reason why I'm talking about it today. And then also, little backstory, I actually taught a little mindfulness workshop with Carly when we worked and lived in Costa Rica to high school female athletes. So, and like that was one of my favorite parts of our time there. So I definitely learned a lot in that because you have to be pretty mindful and present to teach other people how to be mindful and present. So I truly learned a lot through researching to even create that workshop, and then also just putting on the workshop every week or so. So that was a really kind of a launching point into my mindfulness journey, I would say. And so obviously I want to first start with defining mindfulness and talk about some keywords I'm going to throw out probably a million times in this episode. So just a little warning. Obviously mindfulness is the one that's going to get said about every 3 words. So mindfulness is the practice of paying attention to the present moment without judgment or distraction. And there's a lot of things that fall under the umbrella of mindfulness. First, that's just like awareness, right? Being aware of your surroundings, aware of how you're feeling, what caused you to feel this way, why you're feeling whatever emotions you're feeling, and kind of your thoughts, being aware of thoughts that are just popping into your head without any warning, really. So yeah, just the awareness piece. I think that's huge. I think that's the first step in pretty much everything we talk about on this podcast, but definitely here you have to be aware of how you're feeling when you wake up in the morning and you're just feeling a little off. Being aware of that and recognizing it and giving yourself grace is really important. Another key word we're going to throw out a lot is being present. And obviously this is just not worrying about the past or the future, just being present in the moment that you're in. And this can look like, not being on your phone when you're with people, or, even when you're out on a walk, like not being on your phone and just like enjoying the nature. It can also look like, maybe not only talking to one person when you're with a group of people, and kind of being present and interacting with all the people and, getting different perspectives and things like that. So just being present in the moment, you all know what that means. And then gratitude is another word we're going to throw out a lot. This definitely falls under mindfulness, because if you're practicing gratitude and you're either writing down or you're talking about things you're grateful for with somebody, or you're just thinking about them, it's forcing you almost to be mindful about the present moment that you're in and what you currently have or what you currently are. So I think gratitude is like a really, really, really key way to practice mindfulness. And then another word we will also talk about a bunch is grounding. And that can mean a bunch of things, like physically grounding yourself to the earth. Like my mom always, or people talk about just like touching grass, and that's like an insult that's online these days, but actually truly like going outside, putting your feet in the sand or the gravel or the dirt or the grass really truly connects you to the earth and reminds you just the sensory things. Like we're going to talk about a bunch of sensory things in this episode, but truly it makes you feel grounded, and like it just immediately calms you down, at least for me, especially like water or sand really makes me feel mindful. So finding what works for you when you're grounding is also a really big piece that we're going to talk about today. And so I want to kind of jump right into mindfulness techniques and activities, because I think that helps people understand what mindfulness is and how you can be mindful the best, because it's kind of difficult to explain and define, but once you realize what you can do that's going to help you be mindful, it all kind of clicks. So I put down a bunch of things, and I'm going to try to group them together in ways that makes the most sense, but this is what my brain kind of put out on the paper this morning, so bear with me if it's kind of all over the place. So first we'll talk about grounding techniques. When you are stressed or anxious, I feel like those are the times that I use these techniques the most, especially anxiety. If I'm like out in public and I'm feeling anxious, like in a spot where I can't just like cry or freak out, these really, really help. And so the first one I always like lean on is deep breathing. Taking like 3 deep breaths, it's like scientifically proven that it calms your nervous system down. So, and there's all these different types of breathing. There's like star breathing or something. There's a bunch of different ways you can do it, or like there's certain counts you can do. So like breathing in for 5 seconds, holding it for 5 seconds, breathing out for 5 seconds. There's tons of deep breathing techniques that you can do. I literally just take a few big deep breaths where I like lift my shoulders up, I hold it for a few seconds, and then I release. And just doing the like physical in and out of breathing in through my nose and pushing it out through my mouth, really, it's scientifically proven it calms down your body. I'm not making it up, I promise. So that's definitely like the number one thing I'll go to. And I also want to point out that deep breathing is one of the techniques that you can combine with tons of other mindfulness activities. Like you can deep breathe while you're on a walk, you can deep breathe while you're meditating, you can deep breathe while you're journaling. Like it is such a good tool to layer on top of other mindfulness activities. So definitely like the grounding, like base level grounding activity is deep breathing, in my mind, in my opinion at least. And then I will throw in counting. So whether it's counting cars that go by, I talked about that in last episode, counting the clouds, counting planes, if you're near an airport, I don't know, counting things that you see in nature is all really helpful, and it just helps you focus on what you're looking at, what you're feeling, what you're seeing in the moment. Another counting kind of grounding activity is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 sensory exercise. And this is a really popular one. I think I learned this from my mom, or maybe I learned this when we were in Costa Rica, but it's going through all the senses. So you say 5 things that you can see, 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste. And I think this activity is so fun. It really, like we used to do it with the girls in Costa Rica, like the ones that were nervous before they were going to zip line on like the really, there was like a mile long, super high zip line, and some of the girls would just get really anxious. So we would literally sit there and deep breathe and do the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 exercise with them. And it would freaking work. And they would always like get to the end and be like, oh, thanks for doing that with me. Like it's a really, really cool activity, and it takes 2 seconds. But you can like either do it in your head, or sometimes if you're in a group of people and like everyone's a little nervous, or you want people to kind of help you calm down, you can like do it with somebody. So like say there's 5 of you, you can all go around and say one thing that you see, or whatever, one thing you can touch. You can all kind of do it together, and it's just a fun activity to kind of ground you. And it seems a little silly, but trust me when I tell you it works. Okay. And then obviously meditation and like guided meditations are huge with mindfulness and grounding. I struggle with meditation, I think, because it's just hard for me to focus and lock in for a long period of time. But I will say doing guided meditations for like 5 or 10 minutes, there are so many YouTubes or even on Spotify that you can just like close your eyes and lay down and listen to. Those have been really helpful for me. And it is really hard. I think but people that meditate always say like the more you do it, the better you get at it. I mean, that's like with anything, but it is really hard to start and feel like you're being productive because it's almost impossible to like turn your brain off sometimes. And that's like the whole point of meditation. Although I have been corrected a little bit with that, with like, it's okay to let the thoughts come in, but just like to dismiss them and not really acknowledge them or let them get you worked up, and to just kind of focus on your breathing and what you're feeling in the moment. But I would highly suggest or recommend guided meditations if you want to get into meditating, because it is really hard to just like sit still and breathe for 5 minutes without literally doing anything. And then during meditation, something I learned about is body scans. So like oftentimes in the guided meditations, they will talk about like starting at your toes or your head and like going down your body and feeling like what you're feeling in your cheeks. Are you clenching your jaw, releasing your jaw, going down to your neck? Are you sitting up straight? Are you hunched over? You know, it's a really cool way to go through your entire body and like feel like, oh my God, I didn't realize I was like clenching my jaw so tight or hunched over all day, or like cramping my toes up in my shoes. Like sometimes your anxiety and stuff like manifests in you physically, in your back, in your jaw, in your feet, whatever it may be. So kind of doing that body scan and recognizing like, oh, I'm like sitting here with my feet flexed, like let me relax a little bit, is a really good way to kind of ground yourself through any anxiety or stress that you may be feeling. The next category I want to talk about is mindful moving and eating. So these are like physical things that you can do. Well, they all are physical things, but this is like more physical, okay? Physical activity. And so while exercising or moving your body, I think it's really important to be mindful of, one, like how you're feeling while you're exercising, and being like grateful and telling yourself, you know, positive self-talk through your workout, telling yourself how grateful you are that your body can hold you and lift this much weight or run these many miles or do whatever you're doing. Like it is such a blessing and a privilege to be able to exercise and move your body. So just like the thoughts that you have during exercising, I think is something that people don't really pay attention to. And a lot of times it is so like mind over matter when you're moving your body or you're exercising or you're pushing yourself to do hard things. So I just wanted to mention that here, when you are, you know, working out or doing something that is challenging, to kind of, you know, make sure you're putting positive thoughts in your mind, because a lot of times it's easier to just be like, oh, I'm just going to quit when I get to the stoplight or whatever. Like, oh, I'm going to quit at 8 reps instead of 10. Like when you get to that, instead of saying that, when you get to that 8th rep, be like, I can do one more of anything. I can do one more or 2 more of anything. Good math, Al. I can do 2 more of anything. I can, you know, get to 1 more stoplight. And then when you get to that stoplight while you're running, I can do 1 more stoplight. Like those are the types of things you need to have, instead of, and like obviously there comes a time where you've done enough and you push yourself enough, but like, and I'm all for listening to our bodies. I say that all the time. I'm not saying if you're like physically in pain or you're like dying, like, okay, take a break. Listen to your body. That is also being mindful. But if you are just like someone that easily, you know, we all do this, like gives up or just like lets yourself have an out easily with like physical exercise or anything really, just like changing your mindset when you get to that point where you're ready to give up, and just being like, hold on, I can do 1 more rep, I can do 2 more reps, I can do 5 more reps, whatever it is, and like pushing yourself until you physically cannot anymore. And that is really helpful when you are trying to achieve more physical goals. I also want to say, when you are, you know, doing physical exercise, if you're just going on a walk or you are, you know, walking your dog or whatever, you're just outside, doing things like color walks, which is like, I've seen this on TikTok recently. Some of you may have also seen it, where you like, before you even leave the house, you're like, okay, I'm going to look for all the things that are purple on this walk. And you go and you count how many things you can find that are purple, or you just like make a mental note of all the purple things that you see. And it's like such a beautiful way to spend your walk, because you're not only like outside in nature and moving your body, which is one, a huge check, a huge win. You're now like being mindful, and you're, you know, recognizing the beauty in nature, or just the beauty in the space and the environment that you're in. And I think that's really cool. I still have yet to do a color walk, but I really want to. I think that is such a cool way to spend your walk. Or, you know, you can do that with anything, I guess, like maybe numbers if you live in a city and you pass a lot of buildings, or you can pick a word and see how many times you see this word, like literally anything. My family in long road trips would play the alphabet game, and we would have to find a word that goes in the order of the alphabet on all the billboards that we pass. So like obviously we would start with A, and like somebody would be like Alabama, and then the next person would have to find a word that starts with B. You could do that on a walk or in a car, not if you're driving, but that was always really fun. There's just different ways you can spend your time rather than stressing about what's happening in the next few hours or days or whatever. As far as mindful eating, there's so many ways you can go about this. I'm not going to touch on any disordered eating or anything like that. But for me, I am a super fast eater, and I have to be mindful sometimes when I consume my food in about 4 seconds of like, okay, girl, you need to chew your food a little bit longer. For somebody that struggles with digestion, like maybe chew twice before you swallow. Like, I don't know. So definitely sometimes I like tell myself, okay, you have to chew this 10 times before you swallow it. Like, which is like, apparently that's what you're supposed to do. Maybe it's more than 10. I don't even know. But like the number that it is that you're supposed to chew your food is absolutely insane to me, because I definitely do not do that. But if it feels uncomfortable, you're doing it right. Chew your food more than you think you're supposed to. But just anything like that with like, you know, actually being mindful of the taste that you're tasting. You know, if you're trying something new, being like, okay, what is this that I like about this? What do I not like about it? You know, actually being present and mindful of the food you're consuming. If you are making a new recipe or whatever, like being present in the moment and, you know, figuring it out what you want to add or what, just things like that. Like it's really, there's so many ways to be mindful with the food you consume and how you move your body. And I think that all kind of ties under one umbrella for me. Also, I'm sure there's tons of techniques that do help with disordered eating or people that have eating disorders. And so please do your own research or talk to your doctor about things like that, because I'm sure there are tons of ways to be mindful when you're going through something like that. So another topic or, you know, little category of mindfulness activities that I want to touch on is gratitude/journaling. I think these fall under the same umbrella because you can gratitude journal, but we will get there. This is one that really is going to look different for everyone. You can speak out loud what you're grateful for. You can talk to somebody about what you're grateful for. You can just think about something you're grateful for, or you can journal it. With gratitude journaling, again, it'll look different. Maybe it's every day you write down something that you're grateful that happened that day, or maybe it's once a week you do a list, or once a month you do a list, or every other day you think of some things that you're grateful for. I know for me sometimes it feels a little like silly because I'm like, oh, I'm grateful I had pasta for lunch. Like, yes, yes, you can put that in your gratitude journal. But I think it's also fun to challenge yourself to be like, oh, I'm really grateful and proud of myself for standing up for my coworker in this meeting when somebody said something that was kind of rude. You know, there's also things like that you can add to your gratitude journal. Or I'm grateful that somebody stood up for me in a meeting or whatever it is. And so, you know, there's different levels to the gratitude. It is very important to be grateful for all of the different levels. And I think too, sometimes I feel like everyone thinks that they have to be like, I'm grateful for my family, I'm grateful for my friends, I'm great, like for my health. Like, yes, we are grateful for all of those things. But if you are doing daily gratitude journals, like you got to get a little more creative with the things that you're putting down. So just thinking about, you know, doing a quick nightly journal of, you know, thinking about what all went on that day, and then doing a little nightly journal of what you're actually grateful for or what you're proud of yourself for, or what your win for the day was, is huge. And it just ties the day in a bow of gratitude. You know, it ends the day on a positive note, or it starts the day on a positive note if you want to do it in the morning and kind of reflect on the next day and then set your intentions for the current day, or reflect on the last day and set your intentions for the current day. I don't know if I said that backwards. I also want to say I go like weeks, months, not years, but a long time sometimes without journaling. And I understand how hard it is to be consistent with journaling. I think this is another one of the techniques that you really have to figure out what works best for you. It's challenging sometimes. Like I used to journal about like what happened that day or what I was feeling that day, and like sometimes like the day was just so normal and average. It felt like I was just like a little kid just writing like, this happened today and this person said this to me, and it made like I just like didn't know how to journal. And it is okay if that's what you journal, like that is totally fine. I just personally felt like I wasn't getting anything out of it by just like writing down the events that happened in the day without really reflecting much on them. Now I really like to use prompts for journaling. And so I actually stumbled across this TikToker that's doing a series in November called Notebook November. And when I tell you I have not journaled, I brought my journal to show you a little flip through. I have not journaled so much in my life. Like this is Notebook November day 1, and I am like really far into this. Well, okay, I guess I'm like halfway through, but like before that, you can see I literally filled out like 3 pages, and then this is all the rest of this is just 1 month, and it's like a fourth, maybe a third of the book. And so I also fully like used a whole new pen. Like I have never journaled that much in my life. Like I'm doing like 2.5 pages a day, and it's because she's doing really, really good prompts that I wouldn't obviously have thought of myself. And so I want to share a few with you today that are my favorites. I talked about one already on my private Snapchat story, so a few of you may have seen this, but this was my favorite one, actually. I know it off the top of my head. She said, what would the version of yourself from 5 years ago think about the current version of yourself? Then the second follow-up question was, what would the version of yourself from 10 years ago think about current you? And then like, what has been working over the past 5 and 10 years? And then what would you like the version of yourself in 5 years to think about this version of yourself? And like, or what would your current version of yourself want to think about? I forget, but it was so cool to reflect, especially for me, because I just turned 26. So 5 years ago, I was 21, which was like a huge pivotal, you feel like you're finally an adult, like a real adult, and you're in college, or for me, I was in college. So it felt like just a really pivotal time. And then 10 years ago, I was 16, which also feels like at that age, you're like an adult all of a sudden, or you're like, you know, like a real teenager. So those were both like really, really pivotal years. And it was so fun for me to reflect back on both of those and just think like 16-year-old me thinks that 26-year-old me is literally so cool. She is so jealous that I have a dog. She's living out her dreams of living alone in a city. Like, it's just like so cool to reflect on the things that you like thought you wanted or that you did want and how it's manifested into your life now, or the things that you thought you wanted and like you don't have them now and you're like, girl, I did not need that. Like, it's just so cool to reflect. So I really, really loved that one. Another thing she did was to ask yourself what you want to be grateful for this time next year. So it was kind of like a manifestation technique. Okay, in a year from now, I want to be saying I'm grateful for this job that I have, or this relationship that I have, or you know, my health still, and the, you know, the health of my family members, like all these things. And it was like, that was really fun to journal too. The most recent one that I really liked was, hold please. Ooh, how are you self-sabotaging / holding yourself back right now? What is a risk you want to take right now? Why aren't you taking these risks? What would happen if you did it anyway? That's a good one. Okay, we'll end on this one. What would you do different in your life if no one was allowed to have an opinion but you on your life? And then she kind of asked you to dive deeper in like, how much do you let external opinions matter to you? And how can you live your life as though no one has an opinion on you? That I wrote about 4 pages on, because obviously this entire episode is me about, or this entire podcast was started about me not caring what people think. So obviously I cared about what people think, and I still do, but I'm using this podcast to work through that. And so that was a really fun journal prompt for me. I share all those to say that there are so many really awesome journal prompts for you. You can Google them, you can type it into TikTok and find some, you can go on YouTube, you can, you know, get packs of cards that you can journal. I use the We're Not Really Strangers cards a bunch too. I will link that website below. If you don't know, We're Not Really Strangers, it's something you can do with your friends, but it's also, there's packs you can do with couples or with your family or with kids or by yourself. And so I use those questions a lot to journal because they're really good prompts as well. And they just get you thinking. I ask my friends for journal prompts sometimes because they might stumble across something that I wouldn't. So journaling has been such a cool journey and technique for me. Again, I will say before November, my last journal entry was literally from, let's see, hold please, Well, it was from September 24th. Okay, so that doesn't really count. But it was still like over a month. And then before that, it was literally like July. So like I go months without journaling. I think this has been really fun for me. I have not done it every single day, and some days I do it too because I'll miss a day. But it's been a nice little habit, and I like look forward to it because I've been doing it so often. So I would highly recommend, maybe even just challenging yourself to do a month of journaling and see what happens, see how you feel. And you can also go back and do Notebook November on TikTok even whenever you want. So, or if you don't have TikTok, I wrote all the questions down in my notes. So let me know if you want me to share the note with you. But yeah, there are tons of ways you can journal or use journaling to be mindful and practice, so many of these techniques. I think it's also just a good way to, one, I really like that you can get out what you're feeling on paper and it takes it kind of off of you physically. Two, this always happens to me when there's something I'm stressed about. I'm like, let me just go write what I'm stressed about down. And it'll literally take up like 3 lines. And I'm like, oh my God, in my head, this felt like I could have written a novel on this thing that is causing me stress. And it takes up half a page. And like, it really isn't that big of a deal, or it's just truly not that big of an event because I can't even write a whole page about it. And it just puts things into perspective of like, oh, this isn't actually as big of an issue as I thought it was. So I really love journaling for that as well, but definitely because it just gets things out of you. I'm such a like outward processor. I want to talk to people. I want to write things down. Have a podcast. So yeah, I'm grateful that I have people that I can talk to and, this podcast to share things on, but obviously not everything I want to share with everyone. So having a journal that is literally only for you is so helpful. And also I think something that is really helpful, this is the last thing I will say about journaling. I probably talked about it for 10 minutes, but when you go into it, people are sometimes scared to be like vulnerable in their journal because like, oh, what if somebody finds it or reads it, or like, I don't know, like one, put it in a spot where no one's going to find it. Two, you could burn this thing the second you're done with it. Or if you write one thing that you don't like, rip it up and burn it. Like it's not like an incriminating thing. Like you can actually get rid of it, dispose of it, throw it in the trash, burn it up, rip it up, whatever. And I thought that was a good way to kind of go into journaling because sometimes, like I said, people are just scared to be vulnerable when writing things out on paper. It's hard. But to me, it seems sometimes easier than speaking to a therapist or a person or whatever. So whatever works for you, just know that, the more vulnerable and true and honest you are with yourself in your journal, the more you'll get out of it. Those are the final techniques I have. I do want to just say overall, mindfulness is going to look different for everyone. I know I touched on this a little bit in the beginning, but it truly is a journey. You have to figure out what techniques work for you. Like I said earlier, I cannot meditate. That does not work for me. But I can deep breathe. I can journal. I can go on walks and be intentional about what I'm looking for in my walks. So those are the things that I do. And again, for some people, maybe it is meditating once a day or every morning or whatever it is. There's so many things that you can do. I would suggest trying all of them and seeing which ones make you feel the best or feel like you got the most out of. But also remembering that, like, especially with meditating or with exercise or with journaling, it's going to take a minute. You're not going to be able to just be like, oh, I could journal 6 pages every day, like at the start. Like, you're going to have to practice and get better at it, just like with all of these things that we talk about in these episodes. I also wanted to quickly give the disclaimer that I'm not saying that you are never going to, once you introduce mindfulness into your life, that you're never going to be able to think about, or you're not going to be stressed or anxious about the past or the future or whatever. That is still very real and still going to happen. But I will argue that if you are intentional about how you are thinking about those things, that also could fall under the mindfulness umbrella. So if you are sitting down and you are journaling or talking to somebody about how an event in the past made you feel and how you want to, process those emotions and what you want to do moving forward or what you wish you would have said or things like that, that is being very mindful. You are you're writing down how you felt, you're getting out your emotions, you're like tapping into whatever emotions were invoked in you. Like, that is a very mindful practice. On the other hand, you could have just like laid in bed and wallowed, and there's a time and place for that too. I wallow, but I give myself a timeline, and then I'm like, okay, let's reflect and let's be better. So, instead of just wallowing and not doing anything about it, or just like being angry and holding grudges, like there's more intentional ways you can process the feelings from things in the past. And same with, if you're planning a trip or you're stressed about a job interview or things like that, like there's a more intentional way you can go about that where you're preparing actually for the trip or for the interview rather than just like sitting around biting your fingernails, like being anxious about how the trip's going to go or how the interview's going to go. So I would argue that if you're being, sorry to say intentional one more time, but if you're being intentional about how you are thinking about or stressing or worrying about the past and the future, that it would still fall under this umbrella of mindfulness. It's where we just let ourselves like wallow and dwell and cry, and again, all for crying, but like without the intention behind it of eventually like, okay, I'm going to eventually reflect on this and see how I can be better, or I'm eventually going to prepare for this so that I'm not stressed, I hope that makes sense. But I did want to just say that disclaimer at the end. Like, I'm not saying you're going to just be like, oh, I'm just in the present moment all the time. I don't care what happens tomorrow. Like, of course, we're going to stress about things that are happening in the future and how things in the past made us feel. Like, we are humans. I do that all the time. I do that every single day. So yeah, wanted to remind you all of that as well. But I think those are all of my thoughts for today. Thank you so much for joining me for episode 18. We're almost at 20, guys. That is insane. Yeah, a few reminders to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, follow or listen and comment and give a review on all the platforms. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok. Everything's linked below. If you have any thoughts or topic ideas that you want to hear in the future, please send them to me. If you want to come on the pod, my breakfast nook is waiting for another guest. I am ready. Somebody let me know. We can do that together. I would love that, especially if you have something that you're working on letting go of. I would love to talk through it with you and get your perspective on whatever that is. So let me know. I'm feeling really excited to enter into December. New Year's is like my Super Bowl, and I'm so pumped about all the New Year's content. I feel like that is really a time of reflection and being the best version of yourself. So we're going to have tons going on here on the 86 F's to Give podcast community. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening. And if no one has told you recently, I love you, I'm proud of you, and you're kicking life's butt. So keep it up. Bye, guys.